A Boy and His Blob. Trouble in Blobalonia. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
It's a silly title, but I can't be the only one getting Steven Spielberg vibes from this game with that Indiana Jones font on the main menu, and even maybe some rip-off music from Indiana Jones as well in the beginning. But it's also like a kid teaming
Spielberg.
up. Spielberg is
it's
Indiana
George
Jones.
Lucas, right? But I think he was also. I think Spielberg was also.
Pretty
Yeah, he
sure
was
directed
attached,
Indiana
but,
Jones,
like,
but
I don't know.
forget the whole Indiana Jones thing for a second. The whole like kid teams up with an alien-like creature and sets out on a journey bigger than it first appears. Like that's a Spielberg thing.
It's very Spielbergian.
It's actually crazy to me that I hadn't thought of that before, because the first thought I had was like, wow, those first few notes of that song is the Indiana Jones theme.
What I was thinking is more A Boy and His Dog, which is a post-apocalyptic pastiche of society. It's very mean-spirited, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the video game, but it rhymes. It rhymes.
It's like poetry. Sort of. It rhymes.
Yeah.
There you go. That's your George Lucas
rhymes.
reference. Yeah.
Every frame is so dense. That's a deep cut.
A Boy and His Blob is a puzzle platformer where you only play as the boy who must help the computer Blob save Blobalonia. Blob can transform into many useful tools and shapes depending on the jelly beans the boy feeds him. And I feel like if I leave it at just that, that's funny enough to get us started, because David Crane, who wants you to know he made this game, it's called David Crane's A Boy and His Blob on the main menu. Like that is a unique start of an inception for an idea of just, I think that this boy is going to feed this alien blob jelly beans, and that's how he'll change into other shapes.
Yeah, there was definitely some kind of drug experience that preceded the creation of this game to put the jelly beans and the space blobs and the boy himself together. And again, I just want to state that in the manual, you will just hear references to your main character as just the boy, which I think is hilarious, and I don't know why, but it's very off the wall. It's a very unique setting that we've been put into here.
And for the jelly beans, like that's the core mechanic of this game, the jelly beans, and using them appropriately to transform the blob into whatever you need. So though the player directly controls the boy, and Blobbert, as I think he's called, I've been calling him Blob, not boy. His full name. He's controlled by the computer. So depending on what jelly bean you feed him, let's say it's a licorice jelly bean, he changes into a ladder. And apparently, according to the manual, the flavors are named specifically as either puns or alliteration to help the players remember them. The licorice one, I guess I get, like, I don't know why I'm thinking like snakes and ladders for some reason, but like Twizzlers and
some of them are better than others.
It was just the alliteration, but yeah, before even reading the manual, it was just really fun to discover that, to be like, like tangerine turns into trampoline. They kind of sound the same, or like the punch.
Hole punch, yeah.
Yeah, the punch jelly bean makes a hole because you punch a hole. Like that was fun, and it made it like a little, light puzzle element.
And they want you to discover what each jelly bean does, right? Like it's not spelled out for you. I don't think it's in the manual. Could anybody confirm that?
I didn't read it, so I was learning as I was playing.
I did eventually read it, and it does not tell you what does what in the manual.
Right.
It
so
just
it's all
to experiment.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about experimenting. However, and we can. I think we should just talk about the transformations and their usefulness. It's not really up to experimentation, right? Like you need a very specific jelly bean to do a very specific thing each time. You can't like get creative and say like, oh, to get to the next platform, like I'll use the umbrella and fly. Like, no, you need the ladder to climb up to the next platform. So there's always like a specific answer to
I think
each
that
puzzle.
it is pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? There isn't a lot of freedom, but I can imagine that some of these can be solved in several ways, like especially if it's like a ladder or a trampoline. I'm sure that like they can be sort of used either or, but it's unlike a lot of games that we've played that have a more strict illusion of choice and an expanding like inventory where like while playing with the umbrella might not actually work for like the specific puzzle you're trying to solve, you can still play around with the umbrella. Like you can still jump around on a trampoline even if it's not in a place where a trampoline is exactly what you need. Like you can still do these things, and it's at least a step above a lot of games that we played where the abilities are more like key items than anything else.
Yeah, that's a good point. That it's not a location dependent. That like if you fed Blob a licorice and he's like, this isn't the area where I need to be a ladder, so nothing happens. It's like he'll just turn into the ladder and it could be completely useless to you.
Yes.
Yeah. There were times I think it's safe to say the intended use of the umbrella is to like jump off of something and not have fall damage,
die.
You sort of parachute. Yeah. But then but there are times where there's like rocks falling and you could just dodge those rocks like you would think to do in any video game, but you can also use the umbrella there to like, protect yourself from the rocks. Like there are a couple things like that I noticed. But even with the intended like methods of using or of solving each little puzzle, like it still feels like you're being creative. Like yes, they came up with like this is probably what you should do here, but you still have to use your like creative problem solving to decide like, okay, what do I know about what each of these jelly beans do, and like which one could maybe help me. Like there's a part where you're trying to get back up to the surface because a lot of the game takes place in like the sewer and underground, and the sewer grate is still there, and there's an apple jelly bean that turns it into a car jack, an apple jack, and
Hey.
that one took me a while, but it was satisfying to be like, oh yeah, I can like knock this this lid off of the sewer.
Yeah, I'm not gonna give a one-to-one comparison to Portal, but like even Portal, with the amount of freedom that allowed you, like certain concepts were the solve. Like once you had that, you solved the puzzle, and it wasn't like there were 15 different ways to do it. Like a lot of puzzle games, as much freedom as they make you think you have, they are still kind of one-to-one.
So is it fun to then like feed jelly beans to this blob, and then because remember your character can only walk left and right, like your player can't jump, they can't swim on their own. If they fall from more than like I think it's actually 1.5 screens, anything beyond that they'll die. So they really need Blob to get around. But is it fun to call Blob over via whistle, have him stand in a specific spot, feed a jelly bean, and then test out what you think can work?
I say that it is. I mean, I think that it's very it could get repetitive if the game were longer, but for the most part, until like towards the end of like the phase 1 of this game where you're just collecting money, I was mostly I did not get like tired of the loop. Towards the end there was a couple times because I was on the last couple treasures that I was, by nature of hunting down specific treasures, by the end it's going to be harder and harder to find because there's only a few left. So like then I was getting like a little worn out of the gameplay loop, but for the most part I feel like that part of the gameplay loop ended at exactly the perfect time where I wasn't tired of it because I had always been discovering something new up until the end of that.
I also like, just on a more general level, the companion nature of the Blob. Like he's kind of an idiot. Like he looks so dumb. Like he really is dumb.
He looks like a snowman. Like
yeah, but like just look at his face. It's dumb. And
that's my friend.
Yeah, but it is your friend. He's your dumb friend. And you'll be like, come here. You're like, come here, get over here. You'll whistle him over, and it's not like it's not perfect. It takes a minute. He's slower than you, and then he does his dumb bounce over to you, and he'll get like too close. You're like, hey, give me some space. I need to throw this at you, and then mean, like, these are things that should be very annoying. But because he's just your dumb blob friend, it makes it kind of special.
It's endearing.
It's very endearing. And so I think that it really milked that.
Especially when you consider this, setting and the type of gameplay that A Boy and His Blob sets out for you. This would be a tonally weird game if you were fighting enemies often and needed like Blob's assistance in beating them up or something. But for the, mostly there's very limited amount of enemies, like the hopping snakes and falling rocks and stuff like that. That stuff you have to avoid. It's not about killing them or anything like that. And so for the most part, it's this fun platforming, reminds me almost of the original Prince of Persia, where it's like, you don't have any cool weapons or anything. It's just about figuring out how to get to the next area or, via exploration, figuring out like, what do I need to do in order to get over to that next screen? And that's the part of the experimentation is that there isn't an open, there's some secrets and stuff, but there isn't an open-endedness to what you can do. Mostly, when you need to transform Blob into something because it's just that there's you're down in the caves and there's a gap between the next two platforms. And so that you need to turn him into the like bridge that gaps between them, or it's a little bit of an uneven thing. So you've got to maybe try to get up to another platform and use the hole to fall through to get to the other side. Like it's not guesswork, I guess is what I'm saying. You don't have to just assume that there's a puzzle everywhere. You'll know when they present themselves.
On top of that, though, it's not guesswork for sure, but there are built-in secrets too, where like usually they're not, at least unless I just didn't find any. I don't think there are any that we've seen in other games where it's like hit this specific tile of the wall that you would never be able to see otherwise. But it's like, oh, there's a ceiling above me, and then somewhere up there's a little gap, and like, hey, I wonder if I can use a trampoline up there, and like you might just get a reward for going up there.
Yeah, I appreciate that it was more intuitive than some game that it was less creative in the general design that made it like, all right, now find the spot, and you're just gonna have to have your bouncing buddy just go from pixel to pixel searching for it.
And I think the playfulness of the transformations, it varies. So like the bridge and the ladder are just very specific uses that once you figure them out the first time, you'll know when you need them. But the trampoline is something cool where like you bounce on it once, you get like a little hop, and then if you just stay there, it's like the next hop's even bigger, and the hop after that, it's like it gets really almost
it's like an infinite.
Yeah, it's like comedic how high you jump up, and I think more of the transformations could have been like that, but what are you gonna do with the ladder, I suppose, to make it comic booky?
Yeah, I mean, just the nature of him transforming into a ladder is just silly enough for that. But yeah, I mean, because how many are there? How many transformations are there? There's a lot. There's like 15 or something.
At least a dozen, yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot. And to this day, I'm still trying to figure out the connection between Strawberry and Bridge.
Me too. That's like the only one I don't know.
Strawberry Bridges Forever.
That's what I was thinking, actually. Is there a bridge in Strawberry Fields Forever? Because otherwise, I'm out of luck here. But Applejack, like, I could give me that all day.
Yeah. Root Beer Rocket was cool.
Right. Cola Bubble. I get it.
And even the ketchup jelly bean. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah, that's a cool one. Go for it.
Yeah, it took me a while because that's the only one he won't eat. So I was like, okay, maybe this comes in the late game. You got to use it. You got to unlock something before he'll eat it or something. But I do wish the manual was a little less on the nose with this because it would have been really cool to figure out. But when I read the manual, it does say like, the only one he won't eat is the ketchup jelly bean. And then later on, it says like, be careful because if you like jump down several screens and the blob can't get to you, you're gonna have to find a way for him to catch up. But it spelled it like ketchup. I think it would have been cool if it just spelled it like catch up, and then you have to figure it out yourself. But like that's a cool one. Like so if you throw a ketchup jelly bean when the blob is not like near you, he will just appear there. He'll catch up to you.
But isn't that weird since he hates it?
Yeah.
Maybe he's barking at it. Maybe he's like, I saw somebody lay a ketchup jelly bean down there.
Yeah. And the other one that I found cool that serves a similar purpose, if you trampoline your way up like many screens, you can use the honey jelly bean to turn him into a hummingbird. And the hummingbird can fly, so he'll fly up to you. But like, it's just so there. I just wasn't expecting. I mean, I'm up at one point 7 or 8 screens above the blob. You throw the jelly bean down, and like the quote unquote camera or whatever, it just keeps going screen to screen, just watching this jelly bean fall, 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 and then like land in the blob's mouth, and then he flies up to you. It's very satisfying and just so unexpected.
Yeah, and the little animations that are like your dumb idiot friend kind of adjusting himself to your throw. Like if you're really close, he'll have to jump up and get it. And like if you're far, like if you're going several screens down, he'll still like make the adjustment and try and catch it. And it's not like it doesn't have to perfectly fall in his mouth. I think that was fun.
Yeah, it was cool. The one thing that bugged me a little bit is like if you're like a step too far away from him, it still clearly looks like the jelly bean is like hitting him in the face, but you miss him and then he gets all mad. So you gotta like make sure you're close enough to him.
You don't want to make him mad.
It's a weird, unconventional, like story that carries out in terms of like the gameplay beats, you know? So you start off just roaming around outside of your house, and then eventually you see the subway platform and you can walk down into it, and then you might, realize like, oh, if I use the punch jelly bean, I can create a hole and I'll get down to the caves. And then, a good chunk of the game is just spent down there as you're looking for these, secret treasures or there's a good deal of them out in the open too. You're collecting this treasure, which you might not be aware of, like, what's the purpose of this money. And then when you realize that the money is to purchase vitamins to then get to travel to Blobolonia and use the vitamins to eventually shoot your Vita Blaster, which is the gun that Blob transforms into. We're used to games that are like, okay, go left to right and talk to like an NPC who will tell you, like, oh, you might want to do this or you might want to do that or don't go here, or, like they're giving you hints. There isn't anything like that. There's just this cave with all this treasure, this store that sells vitamins, and the rocket that brings you between Earth and Blobolonia.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I hadn't even thought of it. I mean, can you just get on that rocket right away and go to Blobolonia without a gun or anything?
I think you need to get the gun before you can do that.
That makes sense. Because I didn't think, I was just trying to, the whole time I was like, what am I going to use this rocket for? And then at the end I kind of realized, because I knew you would go to Blobolonia eventually from maybe the manual or something. So then I realized, oh, it's a rocket ship, or, it's a rocket you ride on. But the beginning of the game is very interesting, is very unorthodox, but it's also so different than the end of the game. Like, totally different.
Yeah, so that adventure between Earth and Blobolonia, and especially the unique feel between them, I was mentioning that on Earth, and for most of the game, you're just not fighting things, but then all of a sudden, on Blobolonia, you have to, turn them into a blaster and start shooting these, what look like snow pellets, that are in your way to progress, and I just felt like something about the gameplay changed there, and I'm not saying it was for the worse or anything, it just was surprising. I wasn't expecting all of a sudden to be like a run and gun.
Yeah, what it felt like to me was that like a lot of games today, like small like indie games, will like do this thing where they deliberately start out as one thing and then surprise you by changing into. I mean, a lot of them are like dating sims or whatever that like change it. Like what's the Doki Doki Literature Club or whatever that like suddenly like changes into something totally different. Obviously on a different level than that, but like I wasn't expecting to suddenly be firing a gun at, I think they're marshmallows and like popcorn kernels and cherries and stuff. Like from the beginning of this game, I thought the whole game was going to be solving these puzzles. But it turns out that solving the puzzles is like you preparing for the final battle, which is like this weird, like the last 25% of this game is just like this weird final level.
But even near the end, I mean, it definitely adds these gunfighting sequences, but there is still some puzzle platforming happening between gunfights.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's not. I think to Joe's point though, it just feels like once you get to Blobolonia, the mission's a little bigger in scope. You know, that's what I was talking about with like that whole like kid teams up with an alien, and it seems like it's like, you know, me and this like we're just best friends, like we're just hanging out, and then all of a sudden the government wants to take the alien away, and the movie gets really serious. You know,
That's true.
that's kind of what's going on here. So, my larger point was just that, you know, in today's age, without looking at game FAQs, it's hard to say like how much of this is spelled out for the user. And I'm not talking about like solving the puzzles. That's pretty straightforward and easy. I just mean this whole idea of not having almost any guidelines in the actual game. Like, you're just free to do whatever. And I could imagine like renting this game as a kid and not even understanding the cave part, like just not getting it and being like, oh, I'm supposed to be collecting treasure. Like, wish I would have known about that. Like, it's funny that there's nothing in the game that like pushes you in any particular direction. It's all outside information.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough like, and I wouldn't call them direct hints, but there are enough things that you kind of go, huh, like the fact that there's a health food store at the end of that street that you'll eventually have to go and return to get those vitamins, to get to the outer space times. And I think that there's enough there in what you should now know as a puzzle game, that like, maybe I need to go back there. There's enough unique about it to that you would imagine that there's a reason for it to exist. And I'm not saying that this is an obvious game. It very much is not. But I wouldn't say that it's impossible to like happen upon. You get the eureka moment if you did it, I'd say.
Yeah, and like the manual, I mean, I know that's still an outside source, but the manual does give you like enough context to like if I had read the manual first, I would know what my goal was right away. Like, it does tell you like that there's this other planet with this evil emperor that you have to defeat. But you have to save up your money to buy enough vitamins to be able to attack him, because he's like a junk food based evil empire or emperor. So like, it does give you that story, and it's a charming little weird quirky story in the first place, but like, it does give you the context where I think after reading the manual, there wouldn't be too much of a question that like, okay, you have to collect money, buy vitamins, and then somehow get to this other planet.
Yeah, and I'm on board with everything you both just said. I think I was just saying how absurd the game is, in the sense of like Monster Party was also a pretty absurd game, but just followed many familiar video game tropes that it's not like you would get lost or not even understand what the goal is to complete the level. And, you know, Joe, you're right that like the manual spells it out for you, but I saved myself by saying that I rented the game, and most likely you wouldn't get the manual. Although we had a debate about that, if the games at Blockbuster came with the manuals or not. I think it's a toss-up. I think sometimes they did, you know, sometimes the kid before you didn't bring it back or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did anyone look at the Boy and His Blob speedrun for this game?
No.
It's done in like 2 minutes.
So how's it go?
So, I mean, like, you know, at that point, right, I'd just tell anybody who's interested to watch it, because it's one of those games done quick ones too. So, what I understand is that they immediately use the rocket to go straight to Blobolonia, and then once
you can just do that.
I don't know if they're doing something funny. I didn't actually try it in my own game, but let's just say that you can, right? That you can just do that. He doesn't have the Vita Blaster, you know, so how's he going to get past all these enemies?
True.
But there is something you can do to glitch out almost all of the enemies at the very start. Like, you know, he's dodging them for the most part, but then there's a little trick you can do. And then there, you know, you could just basically warp to the end of the game and literally see the credit screen.
like walk across
the credit screen.
Okay, that's funny.
I think that's pretty funny. Like, I think that's pretty funny that the game even has like that feels like that's not usually a thing, right? Like the credit screen is like its own thing where like no other character would be, but it's like apparently embedded into the game. So therefore, he's actually walking across not only the credits, but the text that says he beat the game before he beats the game. It's all funny stuff.
That reminds me of I don't know if it's like this in Fallout 3, but in Fallout New Vegas, if you use console commands to give yourself control of your body, in like the epilogue, because like in the epilogue of Fallout, it tells you like all the effects of the things that you did with each group of people or whatever, and it's just a slideshow. So you'd think that it's sort of like a separate instance. The game is over and you're just watching a video. But if you use this console commands, you can then control your body, and you are in a room that's like a theater, and there's a projection of that slideshow in front of you. And if you walk behind the screen, there is an NPC talking and giving you the narration, and you can talk to him. And so like just that whole like, the game exists within the game, that reminded me of that, and I think it's funny.
Right, and for some reason, like watching the speedrun and seeing the boy and the blob walk through the end credits, almost, it further enforces the whole, like, this is a movie that we're playing. Like, we're playing A Boy and His Blob, the movie, the game, and they're like just actors who knowingly are just jumping across different scenes, because movies aren't filmed in order.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I don't know if that's true.
Movies are just pictures,
and so are games.
It's true.
So we mentioned that the game was created by David Crane, and he really wants you to know that. But David Crane, he's well known for his Atari 2600 games, and I think as soon as I say which one he's most well known for, you'll put it together. But Pitfall, Dragster, and Grand Prix are three of the big Atari 2600 games. I definitely see Pitfall in this game, at least an expansion of it. And now I'm thinking that boy kind of looks like the guy from Pitfall, like same color scheme.
He also did Detroit Become Human, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought when I first saw it. I was like, no, that's David Cage.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think David Crane's done any like new games anytime recently. Apparently, according to David, the game was made in just 6 weeks. I'm not suggesting any foul play, because he had a whole team at Imagineering making the game alongside him, but it was one of those things where Nintendo like got behind it and they needed the game for the holiday season or whatever, so they rushed it in. And that's what I'm going to get to next, is that this is, we're playing A Boy and His Blob, but we're getting into a little segment I call A Mike and His Podcast, Trouble in Chronology. Because this game was released just prior to Christmas in 1989.
Michael.
But the info that we have, a great intel, referred to a January 1990 release. So it is possible that the date that we have here is the wide release date, and that they were able to make the New York or LA or both, or like, maybe specific cities all across North America in time for 89, just in time for Christmas, but that it didn't get a wide release until January 1990, and that's why it's listed as such.
So do you think you've made a mistake?
No, I don't feel bad at all, because we're covering it. I get more nervous. What keeps me up at night is that we're just going to miss one, and then we're going to get to Wario Woods, and it's going to be like, wait a minute, this is only 670-something games. Like, we missed one, and then we're going to have to, like, redo the show.
Start over, yeah. Oh, well.
So I don't care if they're, for what it's worth, if all the games came out in the same month, we're just doing them alphabetically. I'm sure you guys have caught on to that by now, but like Nintendo doesn't say like, all right, well, this game starts with the letter A, so it's coming out on January 1st. Like, it doesn't work like that. David Crane also made what is very popular on our own Discord Patreon page. He made Bart vs. the Space Mutants and Bart vs. the World, which is just, it comes up a lot more on our Discord than I ever thought it would.
These are games I have not played, so...
Yeah, but we will play them. They're NES games.
I'm looking forward to them, yeah.
I mean, maybe Bart vs. the World is like, you play as Bart and the world is played by a computer, and you team up or something. You get
That's sort of
you
how
get the
most
joke I was
one-player
making.
games are, yeah.
Yeah. On the sequels and spin-off side, A Boy and His Blob was followed by a sequel on the Game Boy titled The Rescue of Princess Blobette, and it's just a Game Boy game, so it's not nearly as involved or anything, but it was a success. And then there was 2 canceled games, came pretty close. A Boy and His Blob, Jelly's Cosmic Adventure. I don't know who Jelly is, but I'm sure we would have met them and learned all about what they were doing on Blobalonia and then getting into all sorts of space mischief. And that game was going to come out on the Game Boy Advance in 2002, but it was canceled due to financial troubles, which seems weird because if it's almost done, just finish it and make the money. I don't know. And then in 2005, which is only 3 years later, A Boy and His Blob remake was being developed for the Nintendo DS, but just based on this box art alone, I don't think this would have been the hit they were thinking it was going to be. Something about the art direction's all wrong and just makes it feel like it's for very young kids. So this is an unreleased game as well. Same thing, they're citing financial troubles, but it's like maybe if you just release these freaking games, you wouldn't be so underwater, Majesco. But the unreleased game...
Majesco.
Yeah. At this point, yeah, like they somehow either teamed up with David or bought the IP or whatever, but they're making these games. And the DS one, not the Game Boy Advance one, can be found online now, so you can play like as much of the game as they had finished at the time in the demo. But after 2 failed attempts to bring the series to Nintendo's handhelds over the years, a reimagining of A Boy and His Blob was developed by WayForward Technologies and released again by Majesco for the Wii in 2009. And this was a game that I remember even being like, oh yeah, like I've heard of this title somewhere, like I should pick up this Wii game. I never wound up doing it, but I've only ever heard good things about it. So I can't say exactly how much it changed, but it is, at the very least, it's an 8-hour long game. So clearly much different than the 2-minute and 10-second speed run, or even the modest, 2 hours that it might take someone to fully experience on the NES.
And that was A Boy and His Blob? Like that was a DS game?
No, it was a Wii game.
Sorry, Wii. So it was still that IP. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's actually a remake of the very first game. So, you're doing the whole thing again, going down into the caves, collecting the treasures, going to Blobalonia, blah, blah, blah.
Is there any...
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah. Are there any fun, jokes and quips that they say? Or is it just... they're both mute, like in the NES game?
I don't know if there's talking.
Okay, good.
I have a hard time imagining the blob talking.
Yeah, but I will tell you that there's new power-ups. So it's not a one. That's my point, is that it wasn't a 1-for-1 remake. It was just we're going to make this game again, but we're going to make it so much larger. So there's more jelly beans or whatever and different things that you can use, and it probably does a better job of spelling out the whole freaking game for you and giving you tutorial after tutorial after tutorial. And it's got this whole Scribblenauts art direction with it that's kind of strange for a Wii game.
Okay. Sounds disappointing.
I was always looking to buy it, and then I just never did. So I'm responsible for Majesco's financial troubles. And, according to who you ask of our listeners, I'm also responsible for our Essential Games List troubles, because I keep certain games off the Essential Games List. And maybe, I'll do it again today, or maybe I won't, because we all get to vote in the Essential Games List. Sean? It's your last time going first.
This is it.
This is it. Also,
what am I going to do?
We wish everybody a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys.
It's
Happy New Year.
It's December 30th.
Jolly good fellow.
Yeah.
Have a good time with your blobs. Everyone get together with your blobs.
Don't
celebrate.
let your blobs get wet.
Just remember,
After
even
midnight.
if 2022 wasn't good, now you have 2023 to look forward to, and 1990 at the same time. So if 2023 turns out to not be so great either, just pretend like you're in 1990 with us. Sean, you have a vote?
I do have a vote. I'm a big fan of your dumb idiot friend. He's very charming. I like hanging out with him. I wish there were more interactions that you could have with him other than feeding him jelly beans. He seems to just be using you for jelly beans. And that's sort of where I draw the line. Like, once a relationship sort of shows that, like, it's more transactional than anything, that's where I start to get, like, weirded out and like, oh, maybe this isn't the person that I fell in love with, and we might have wasted the last few years of our lives together. But in Boy and His Blob, I think that it's very unique, and I appreciate the puzzle aspects, but I don't know, it didn't feel complete to me. It has all the charm in the world, and a lot of these games that have a lot of charm don't have enough for me to say that, like, it's got all that I want. So I'm being very vague here, and I'm giving the game a disservice by being this vague, but I am saying that this is a definite play it, but I will not be voting it essential.
This is the kind of game that has enough uniqueness to sell someone like me on the concept of the game before I even play it. Like, I was just reading up on it, and I was like, oh, it's going to be a blast. Like, I'm this helpless boy, and somehow this alien blob is my best friend, and we're going to help save his homeworld via the powers of jelly beans. Like, great. I'm in for it. Unfortunately, I feel like the jelly bean system and the lack of not like solutions in general, but just like the possibilities in my head felt really limited during the actual gameplay. And maybe a more open game would have also led to a lot more glitches and making it really easy because it's too obvious to solve it because you can solve it however you want, you know? Hey, that sounds like that Scribblenauts game I was referencing, right? Where it's like all of a sudden, if you can think of it, any way we'll solve the game. That's maybe a little like what I was looking for here with the blob, is just a little more freedom of exploration and freedom of what I can do with him. It's a neat idea, and it does translate most of its ideas in the game, just not in a grand enough manner to keep me hooked. So I get why this one kind of has like cult classic status. People fight about whether this game is actually good or not, and I would say, yeah, it's good. I just don't think it's one of the greats. Joe?
So, Sean, I really, what you said resonates with me a lot. I think there's just like, there's a lot that's valid about this game feeling like it needs a little more to be like a complete game. And there's a lot of like little, not negatives, but just like little things that feel like they're missing in this game. But there's still just something about it that really, really is fun to me. Like, I like it despite its like shortness, and I know you guys too, but like I guess I kind of was wrestling with this a little bit. Like, I don't need it to be, I'm okay with it being like a bite-sized adventure. So like that part I'm still okay with. And like, yeah, there are just a lot of little things that that feel like they could be elevated, but just the idea alone and the charm of, I think using the jelly beans is so cool. And like the asymmetry to the first and second half of the game is just interesting and keeps you like engaged in this weird way. And it's just, I think I'm part of the cult, I guess is what I'm saying, of this cult classic. I know this is not, I don't have any power here, but I think I am going to throw it an essential vote. It's weird because like I do have things that I feel like it could have done a lot better, but like it was just a lot of fun to me. I just feel like you're not going to get this anywhere else either. I feel like you should play this. I'm going to say it's essential.
You're allowed to have fun, Joe.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I'll replay it before our best of 90 in 3 years, and we'll see if I want to fight for it to go on.
Yeah, and you're also allowed to like stay in like a relationship that's just like good for now and not forever.
Right?
Like
yeah. Never treat a relationship like it's going to end until you know it's going to end with your blob.
Yeah,
and specifically with your blob.
I was gonna say, I don't think that the blob at the end of this game is gonna like not stay in touch, right? Like he's gonna go live on his own planet now, like it's safe again, and the boy probably doesn't want to live on Blobalonia, but
and you have shared trauma too, so I feel like that factors in.
Well, that's not very healthy, but I get what you're saying.
That factors in, so it's like you're that might be why like
that might be why it won't work out. Yeah. I'm learning a lot.
The trip on the rocket was relatively short, too, so it's not like they can't visit often.
That's true. You're right. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. It's funny that, Blobalonia has been in front of us this whole time, and we just never noticed. Or that's like Earth 617, the one like that's right next to us where almost everything's the same, but they have this planet called Blobolonia that's like right next to the moon. Well, if you want to hear more stupid conversations like that, and not referring to the whole episode, most of the episode was pretty good, but if you want to hear more stupid stuff like us riffing on ideas that we just kind of come up with on the spot, look no further than our interview on the Boss Rush Network. We did an interview with them. I'll try to remember to put a link in the show notes here for it, but it's very easy. You just type in Nostalgia Boss Rush Network. It's on podcast. It's on YouTube. YouTube, you get to see our faces. Maybe you play a game with yourself where you try to like guess who's who before we reveal who we are. Spoiler alert, we all have facial hair, so that won't be the easiest way to give it away. If you didn't think any of us had facial hair, that's also kind of interesting. And let us know in the comments on www.nostalgicast.com. Go to the contact thing and be like, I thought you guys were all clean-shaven. That would be a really interesting subject title to receive in my email box, even if you didn't believe it. Just do it anyway. But seriously, our interview on Boss Rush Network is really cool because we're not just talking about our chronological exploration. We're talking about all things video games. And we're going to continue to talk about all things video games, whether it's on other podcasts, on our podcast, or on our Patreon, patreon.com/nostalgia, where we do all sorts of cool episodes. We did, at the very end of this year, right around the time of this episode posting, we did a Game Boy launch episode, too, covering all things Game Boy. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, it just costs $1 for 1 month, and then you can say, I'm never giving these guys another penny again, but just $1, and you can hear that episode. Pretty cool.